Makaon na to pag-usap sa kalibutan, tay.
Kabalo ka magbuhat og puso dong?
Dili.
Maglala ka og lukay, magbuhat ka og kasing-kasing, sudlan og humay, lungagon, tanawa. Murag busog nga dughan. Ug kani makahupay sa kagutom.
Usbo na to ang kalibutan, tay.
Kung gusto nimo, makabot ra gyud nimo. Maningkamot lang gyud ta. Kinahanglan, lig-on gyud ka. Komplikado ang kinabuhi. Makat-on ka sa bisan unsang kasinatian. Hugot lang yun ang pagtuo. Sa ngadto-ngadto, ligunon ka sa panahon. Manggihatagon ka. Ania ang kalibutan. Imo kining tanan.
Initiating virtual tour.
And we are live!
Actually, this is pre-recorded.
Hello there! You made it! Welcome to the virtual tour of the University of the Philippines, Cebu. I'm Annie, and I am a proud alumna of UP Cebu. And between just you and me, I had the best 4 years here in UP Cebu. I came from the College of Communication, Arts, and Design, where we did not learn only the basics in journalism and other communication components, but they also taught us how to become relevant.
You only have one viewer.
My college is also home to the fabrication laboratory, where people meet and converge to use different equipment where they can fabricate things, stuff for the advancement of industrial and product design. All of this comes from the creativity of the Fine Arts program itself. Hey, Sean, why don't you tell them more about the Fine Arts program?
The Fine Arts program itself, founded in 1975, is the pioneer formal school in the fine arts outside the national capital. The college is also the host to nearly half a century-old annual painting competition, Jose Hoya Awards, in honor of the famous national artist Jose Hoya, and from whom UP Cebu's Jose Hoya Gallery was named after.
As the campus of the premier university here in the Visayas, we have to be good. No, we have to be better, or even we have to be the best, not only in the humanities, but even in the sciences as well. Isn't that right, Sean?
That's right, Annie. In 2014, UP Cebu CENVI, or the Central Visayas Center for Environmental Informatics, came up with high-resolution maps using LiDAR technology. The use of this technology by UP Cebu CENVI provided government agencies with accurate data for more precise community flood risk assessment and management. This helped local government units make informed decisions based on data science and, in the process, maximizing their financial resource utilization. And in the case of the Naga Cebu landslide of 2018, UP Cebu CENVI's use of LiDAR technology allowed for one of the fastest search and retrieval operations in a disaster in the Visayas.
Helping the community through the sciences is very fulfilling. But we were not just exposed to that. We were also exposed to the social sciences, from political science to psychology, and all of these concepts helped shape our mindsets to become better citizens. In fact,
the College of Social Sciences articulates and addresses global challenges. The college offers comprehensive and appealing programs for high school, undergraduate, and graduate students. The Master of Education program is a non-thesis graduate program designed for graduates of the Bachelor of Elementary Education or Bachelor of Secondary Education who want to pursue their professional preparation through future studies in areas relevant to teacher education.
And of course, there were also budding business leaders in campus. They were the ones who had the nose for business but had the big heart to be of service.
Under the School of Management, students are not only taught to be decision makers, but the forerunners in marketing and finance. It also hones those interested in further studies of this field through its Masters in Business Administration program.
Today, I am now a practicing broadcast journalist, an opinion columnist, an entrepreneur, a teacher, a better person, really. All of this because of my training and experience at UP Cebu.
Nurtured to create, inspired to innovate, destined to serve. We at the University of the Philippines Cebu are driven by academic and operational excellence.
And that's it. Thank you so much for joining this virtual tour. I'm so happy you took part. Oh, look, Sean! A lot of people are tuning in.
But the tour is over.
Well, we'll just do it again.
Ready when you are, Annie.
Reinitiate virtual tour.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome for joining us this afternoon for our webinar, Integration of Social Media in the Teaching of Literature. So, we are waiting for the arrival of our host, no? Si Ms. Jera. Medyo busy po kasi ang UP Cebu ngayon eh. Right now, we're having our town hall meeting po para sa plan for the UP Cebu for the conduct of face-to-face classes for the coming semester. So, mayroon din kaming webinar, and all the other faculties meron ding kanya-kanyang mga activities as of the moment. No?
Sir Mike?
Yes, Miss Noel.
I think let's just start na lang para hindi na lang sila maghintay. So maybe we can talk to Miss Jera later. I can talk naman. Slide. Okay, so again, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our webinar for today. I'm so sorry if I sound sick because I'm kind of sick, but let's as we always believe that the show must always go on. So I would like to welcome everyone for our again webinar. We have I'm seeing in the chat we have our viewers from Rojas Isabela. We have I think Kanina from Bataan. We also have I think from UP Diliman, Cebu Normal University. We have guests from North Cotabato, and I think that's it, from Bulacan and from Leyte. So hello po sa inyo, and thank you very much for gracing our event today. And of course, we have our host already, Miss Erica Incabo. I will be our speaker, Miss Erica Incabo. Hello, Miss. Good afternoon. And all right.
Hello,
so we
good
also have from the
afternoon,
province of Aurora. Good afternoon, Miss. Ready na ka today? So, all right. So Miss Jera is here, I believe. Let me just continue with the webinar reminders. Sir Mike? So we would just like to remind everyone of these webinar tickets to note during our webinar. So this webinar will be recorded. We will be keeping tab of the proceedings for this webinar for documentation purposes. You are free to leave if you feel uncomfortable that this session will be recorded. And please mute your microphone during the talk. We want to make sure that the speaker's voice is clear to everyone. We may opt to remove you if you don't follow this request. And please refrain from taking pictures or videos of the talk. If you do so, you will be held accountable of data privacy violations if the copy you created leaks into other internet outlets. We wish to keep the identity of our participants private, so as yours as well. And if you have questions while the talk is ongoing, you may put them in the Q&A box. After the talk, you will have a chance to ask your questions, and we wish for you to only use the chat box rather than voice because of our time constraint. And don't forget to evaluate. Your inputs on the webinar will help us improve our next webinars. After you have answered the forms, you will be given a proof of participation. The evaluation link will be opened right after the webinar and shall remain open for only 10 minutes. We are currently live streaming on our YouTube channel, the LRC UP Cebu. For those watching through our YouTube live, you will get your proof of participation by staying until the end of the session. We will be announcing the instructions at the live chat, so please stay tuned. And for more webinar and training updates, please follow and contact us on these platforms. We have our Facebook page, Teaching and Learning Resource Center UP Cebu. And we have our YouTube channel where you can review our past webinars, TLRC UP Cebu. And you can also visit our website, tlrc.upcebu.edu.ph, or for your concerns later on, you can email us at lrc.upcebu@up.edu.ph. So once again, welcome to our webinar for today, and Ms. Jera.
Okay, thank you so much, Noel. So I think Noel already gave us our webinar reminders. I have a little bit of glitch kanina with the TLRC, but I'm really, really happy that I am back. Now, may we ask Dr. Nati Isteliore to welcome us, to have a short welcoming remarks for us in our in our session for today, which is all about integration of social media in the teaching of literature. Oh, Michael, is it already our speaker's introduction?
Yes, Miss. Doc Nati is
Okay.
not available kasi may meeting po sila sa
Oh, okay. So if Doc Nati is unavailable, then I actually wanted to officially welcome everyone. Is it okay, Michael, if I would officially welcome everyone to our session today?
Yes, Miss.
Okay. So thank you so much for being here with us. This session is generally geared towards giving teachers more information about different ways to deliver education and the use of different social media platforms when it comes to teaching. And this is not only for teaching English and literature. You can also use this for other types and kinds of courses and subjects as well. Even I, as a teacher, also use social media at some point in teaching science. I am a science-based teacher. Now, I do hope that you will learn something from our speaker today and that you will listen well. And also, maybe some of you might change your mind about social media. Okay, Michael, I give the floor to you for the introduction of our speakers. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Ms. Jera. So our resource speaker this afternoon is an instructor at the University of the Philippines, Cebu, handling language, literature, and communication subjects. She is a Master of Education in English graduate with distinction whose research is on digital reading and has presented her research at local and international conferences. She also completed her bachelor's degree in secondary education at Cebu Normal University in 2017 and graduated as cum laude. Her research interest includes creative writing, cultural studies, and language development. Everyone, let us give a virtual applause to Professor Erica May in Cabo. Good afternoon, Ms. Erica.
Good afternoon, Miss Erica.
Good afternoon, Ms. Jara, Sir Michael, and to everyone. So happy to be here again.
Very, very pretty today.
Thank you, Ms. Jara. I prepared for this day.
Diba? Even our speaker today is very excited to be with you all. I'm also very excited, Miss Erica. I will give the floor to you. Thank you so much.
Okay, permission to share my slide, Sir Michael.
Yes, please go ahead.
Erica, you share.
Okay. Can you confirm if my slide is okay now?
Yes, Miss, everything is okay.
Okay, thank you so much, Sir Michael. And again, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our session today. I really appreciate that despite our busy schedules, we we have this time to convene and talk about concepts. So this afternoon we'll be dealing with how we can properly use social media in the teaching of literature. And before we deal with concepts, I would like to open the idea that this is still a work of progress, and this changes according to digital innovations and societal changes that may occur. But more than that, before we really consider, in having this, applying this in class, there are things that teachers need to consider when we talk about social media integration in classes. First, I would like to say that it must be consensus, meaning you cannot just tell your students that, okay, you create an account, you have to make it public because that's part of the grade. You can never do that. Even if you had the purest intention that you need that for the class, you need them to have this digital skills, and you need to develop their digital literacy in dealing with information, you cannot simply do that as a teacher because that's against the moral code and for ethics as well. Next is privacy matters are really important. So you have to discuss that one to your students and to your learners before you try to test an intervention or to have an activity that really concerns some privacy issues, because that can hinder learning. So for example, you got this very good activity, but then students might be uncomfortable posting their work, so that's a problem. And third is accessibility. Before you plot out everything, get to know the profile of your students. What are their access to gadgets and to the internet? So that must be the very thing that you must consider first before we deal with what to do, what to strategize, what to inculcate in our class. Okay, so moving forward, again, let me introduce myself. You can just call me Erica, and on happy days, I usually love dealing with those stuff. So I'm so in love with the classic way of, typing. I'm so into poetry, by the way. And so I like my poems transcribed or typed in the manual, very old typewriter. Special consideration had to like thesis or research work because that's really impossible and tedious to do that there. But for literary works, I really love to get into the touch of the mechanical keyboards of a very rusty typewriter. I don't know if you also get to have that feeling, but yes, sometimes sometimes in school activities, students get so excited seeing these equipments. I know that that's old, that's not really gearing to social media, but then that provides a fresh taste, especially for dealing with Generation Alpha and Generation Z, because sometimes they don't know what to do with that because they're so into the technical stuff and the digital stuff. So, but for those who are part of the silent traditionalists, baby boomers, I think we're still into that equipment and we know how to operate that one. So moving forward, this will be our session flow for today. So we will be talking about social media, and since we are talking about social media, it's impossible that we set aside digital divide because we are having different sets of learners per year. That is why I'm always having the proposition that if you are a literature teacher, you are always changing your lesson plans, you're always updating your pedagogies, because learning materials that are 10 years ago might not be of local context to our learners. And we need to establish their schema. So we need to really update. And digital divide would let us understand what are the preferences of our students. It's also not safe to assume that every year our students are getting younger, because there are also students of ours who are in ALS program, diba? They are of varied ages, and we cannot just provide a simple or a unified plan for all of them. They know different types of literary materials. They know different types of social media applications. So it varies. And then third, we will be dealing with how can we teach literature with social media, and how social media is very relevant to getting the interest, attitude, and the skill of the students. And lastly, we will be having the open forum wherein you can share your experiences or you can ask questions that I will try my best to answer. So let's start. So as literature teachers, or maybe English teachers or teachers of reading, diba? But let's just put into the notion that when we say literature teachers, we are using literature as a supplement or as a main course of our subject. So as literature teachers, how do you define literature? There are many definitions of literature, but it's always from A to Z. But then I will be presenting some of the most common definitions, and one of that is it's a body of written works. It's a body of written works, and sometimes we have this misconception. We add a surname to that definition. We say a body of fictional written works, and that's not acceptable because that's unfair to other genres. We will not be thinking that when we say it's literature, it's a distinction between fact and fiction. No, because not everything in literature is fiction. Not everything in literature is imaginative and speculative alone. It's unfair to creative nonfiction. Creative nonfiction has various subgenres: autobiography, biography, memoirs, blogs, testimonials. Those deal with facts. And this is the thing that I would like to point out. When we teach literature, we are not just teaching our kids to identify formalistic functions or elements of a short story. We're not just telling them, okay, who are the characters? What is the scene? What is the setting? That is still essential, but that does not encapsulate literature teaching. In fact, when we teach literature, we teach our students very essential skills that would help them survive in the real world. You might be saying, bakit pa ako babasa niyan, Miss? When I will be an engineer in the future, I might not be using those. When I'll be in the doctor in the future, I might be needing those stories. Aside from teaching values, aside from inculcating morality, we could discuss critical concepts that will be helpful for our students to deal when they are in the online scape or in the online landscape. Remember PISA results, diba? We're not really doing good in PISA or any other global assessments. Philippines is always at the bottom part. And is that entirely our fault? Maybe not, but then we can do something about it. And literary skills could develop to like checking what's valid or not, forming justifiable arguments, because that would help them. That will be like a ripple effect. So if they know how to rationalize and be critical in forming their judgments and criticisms on a certain work, that would apply to other subjects as well, in culture, in arts, diba? In arts, in media, in language, in math, in arithmetic, and any other fields, even in science. And in fact, I think Ms. Jera can also relate because they're also using arts and teaching, science. So it's everything in the postmodern period is really intertextual. And in the postmodern period, there's always a notion that everything is intertextual and nothing is 100% original anymore. That is why I always tell my students, before, if the battle is about being original, in this period, it's not anymore something like that. It's more of continuing the conversation. What if this is not really the concept that I really got? For example, this theme, I did not start this theme, but I reinvented and remodeled this theme. So that's something good, because after all, there's something like a saturation of ideas. So how do we deal with that? We try to remodel, reinvent, and we innovate. Next is we go to this one, and this is something very interesting. When we speak of literature, we are forming an organized violence committed to ordinary speech, and this is from Sir Terry Eagleton. What does that mean? Literature transforms and intensifies ordinary language, which actually deviates from everyday speech. So instead of sticking to denotations, we are teaching our kids to read not just by the lines, between the lines, and beyond the lines. We're teaching them to understand figurative languages. We're letting them understand what lies beyond simple syntax of words. For example, sometimes no, if we are too literary on things, we also let our students identify the practicality of the context. Why? Because sometimes, imagine there is a student who approach you and will say, "Thou still accord me the occasion to yield. I desire nothing for thyself. I seek for redemption." What could be your reaction? What could be the reaction of other teachers who are not so into literary works? They would say, in Bisaya, we say that, "Naunsa ka?" Or in other languages, in Tagalog, we say, "Anong ibig sabihin yan?" We don't understand that. You have to be direct to the point. So being literary comes with certain context and comes with certain practicality. The student could just simply say, give me another chance to submit my work, I want to pass." But imagine a student telling you that, diba? So that's sometimes unusual. So next is when you talk about literature, it's whatever that makes sense from A to Z. Literature teachers are always brilliant. I would like to claim that one. We are always brilliant. Not just literary teachers, but teachers who really love literature. You give them a concept, like you give them letter M, they could talk about magical realism. You give them letter P, they could talk about pastiche. You give them what? Letter E, they could talk about Edgar Allan Poe. So everything from A to Z. And our students are also like that. You can give them a concept, they would give you a modern term or a term that they like as well. Like, for example, C, they will say cyberpunk, and you don't know about cyberpunk. So that is always a challenge for us to keep up with trends, to also get to know fads as well, because they are two different things. Next, yes, we got these definitions of literature, and literary teachers or literature teachers, we teachers would always love to claim that literature reading is exciting, but it doesn't really apply to sometimes our students. There are students who really don't like to read, and teachers sometimes they also don't like to read, and that's a problem if it's the teacher not wanting to read. Always remember that reading is a set of skills. It's a macro scale composed of different sub-skills. And with the denotative definition of reading, it's just like reading a text. But right now, we could read a media, we could read sounds, we could read songs, and that provides another context for interpretation. This is what I would like you to tell. If students don't like to read, that's no, I'm just accepting it as it is without doing anything. We are at fault na at that time. As teachers, we always need to encourage. Our job as literature teachers is not just to provide students with literary materials and with analysis. As much as possible, let them, fall in love with reading, not just with literature, but with reading. Because if they love reading, we know that we are cultivating critical thinkers in the future. So why students don't like to read the eye? Why they always deviate and they always frown upon when they're given, you give them a short story. What's the definition of a short story? Diba? It's more than 5 pages. It's unlike flash fiction or short stories, but if it's short story, it's 5 to 10 pages or 5 to 15 pages. You give them something like that, what's the actual reaction? They will say, "Oh, reading material na naman, miss," or "I don't like reading, miss," or "I'll just, read a summary." They will not really read the entire text. And there are many themes, 3 common themes based on research as to why students don't like to read. First is they don't have the ability to read. So it's simply I cannot read. They might be having learning challenges. So we will go back to our first proposition. When dealing with or teaching literature, you have to get to know the profiles of the learners. What is their current status? Multiple intelligences, learning preferences, accessibility, resources. Those are the things that you need to consider before, of course, privacy matters on at hand as well. Then other students, they lack reading skills. They can identify words, meaning they can recognize that this is ability, that's read as ability, but they don't know the meaning of ability. They don't know how to contextualize a certain term. They don't know how to define it based on how it's used in a sentence. And sometimes this is also our challenge as literature teachers. We provide them materials that are not friendly at their current stage. Like, for example, imagine this is a grade six student, and you give that student for example, Murakami text, or a grade 4 student on Murakami text. So she might not, or he might not be able to understand that because the readability of that material might not be parallel to his or her level. So you might as well really be vigilant about the materials that you are given and giving, or even the social media that you are currently integrating in that specific lesson or course. Next is mindset. So mindset is really important, diba? A student will always have negative thoughts about it. Like, if I will read that, I will just be wasting 1 hour. I will not understand because I'm not a fast learner. I'm a bad reader. So we might as well, teachers, we are always the total package. We are the guidance counselor. We are the second parents. We are the teacher. We are the critic. Lahat we do that. And for mindset, we might as well always encourage our kids, but do not be when we encourage our kids, also inform them about what needs to be done and what needs to be improved, because sometimes when we always encourage, and we encourage in a very bad way, we might be cultivating attitudes that might not be very relevant for them when they become adults, because they're always tolerated when they were young. And lastly, we got the interest. The attitude students have towards reading is very much critical. A lot of time you see teachers struggling that they got very good materials, lesson and activities are very organized, but then they did not hit their competency because students are not interested in that lesson. So this is where metacognitive strategies will come in. What are those? We have 3 connections. We got text to text, text to self, and text to world. How can we apply that in our class? When you talk about text to self, that's particularly for the student and the text that he or she is reading. For example, I am reading The Scarlet Letter, and I can relate to that because my mother is also a victim of this and that. So that's her schema. She tried to connect her schema, personal schema, to the reading text. What is the role of the teacher to facilitate that one? Hindi ka pwedeng magsabi na you cannot do that because you cannot place your personal experiences. This is objective, this and that, or you create another experience. You just make it up. You cannot do that as a teacher. Next is we also have text to text, and this is the goal of the postmodern period, to see that works that are being published right now is a continuation of the conversation of the works of before. So it's not anymore a battle of which is better. It's more of how the concept was continued, how we try to reinvent concepts. And that is also our goal to students. Sometimes kasi we are confusing them. When we let them give activities, we always say, you have to be original. You have to be the only one thinking about it. No, you have to properly set your definition of being original. Because when you say this theme should be original, but then love is not original anymore, it has been transcribed and encoded in many songs, poems, plays, and dramas. So it's impossible. And instead, we teach our students to use the classics. But when you introduce concepts, when you introduce J.K. Rowling, who else? Colleen Hoover, when you introduce Stephen King or even Murakami, you don't just forget about your Shakespeare, your Brownings, your Orwell, your Tolstoy, and Jane Austen. You don't just forget about them. So instead, you use the themes of the past and you integrate that to the themes of the present. And how will we continue that one if we based on like schema? You base that into local colors of Philippine literature. So, di ba, we are continuing it. And student schema will really be of solid foundation. So, speaking of interest, here comes social media. Our students are very much interested about social media, and not just students, even us teachers, right? We are interested about the ways and the advantages, disadvantages that social media can bring. However, sometimes its integration will depend on some certain norms. Why did I say that? I've been affiliated to some schools that don't allow teachers and students to use phones in class. So regardless of your intention, you are not really allowed to bring phones. What could be we cannot really just say that they're entirely wrong, right? But doing so, you are missing out certain opportunities because our kids, when they go outside the classrooms or when they go home, they are using it. Might as well capitalize on that and find ways on how to teach them how to use that properly in class, or how could it supplement learning or classroom instruction. So what is really social media? Social media may take various forms. So it could be around photo sharing, blogging, social gaming, social networks, video sharing, business networks, virtual and world reviews. So it encompasses everything. So as you can see right now, the onset of the pandemic check Philippine education, di ba, we had a major shift. We got a cultural change from having traditional classroom face-to-face setting to blended education or to online remote learning to modular education. And students, when they answer module, they use YouTube to supplement the answer. Sometimes they use Google, or sometimes they use other sites to help them understand a complex lesson. Social media enables us to create, share, comment, and discuss digital content. And with this giving us like various skills, we must also consider that social media is dynamic, interactive, democratic, people-centric, social, and adaptive. And I know if you are under Marxist lens, you might as well have problems with the word democratic. But then again, we'll just say everyone can access that as long as you have the available resources. Third is social media is a powerful driver for change. And you can see later, 10 or 30 years ago, what's the way how do we teach literature? How do we tell students to convene and brainstorm their ideas? How do we let them respond to a material? Usually it's through essays. Usually it's through text. It's through words. Give me a 500 words response essay. Give me a response poem. It's usually the thing. We're not saying that those are ineffective because we graduated from those, right? That taught us skills. It's just that at this period, we have to know that there are many ways for us to get responses from our students through songs, through art, through pictures, through digital formats. And you will be surprised with the way students can be very creative with their outputs. Next is social media is always in a state of change, meaning what could be before, if you can use what's that app before Facebook, I forgot the term. Before we are using that one. The way you can change skin. I forgot the term. That you can just change the skin and yeah, Friendster. Before we could use Friendster in class, but right now, if you I talk to grade 8 students and then I tell them, do you know Friendster? And they will just say, what's Friendster, miss? Is that a new term to refer to a friend? Because they're not using Friendster anymore. It's actually changing. And before we are not using Instagram. And before only limited people can access Twitter, but now everyone's on Twitter, and you will be amazed with how forums are being made in Twitter. Moving forward, we have here the social media timeline since we are dealing with change. Recorded social media origin started from 1997. So it's the creation of a blog site named 6degrees.com. Later on, we got platforms such as other blog journals emerged. Then we come with wikis, and then we got the integration, or no, not the integration, the onset of various social media applications: Facebook, Friendster, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, what else? Discord, and many other applications. In fact, my students could do better than I do in enumerating all social media applications. So, si teacher, palagi pa rin, sometimes behind with students enumerating all of these. But can we just simply accept that? No, we need to find ways to be acquainted with those as well. That is why it's always a challenge for us to be speculative of the infinite possibilities that go with, societal and digital innovations, and how could it affect our classroom instruction. So speaking of change and transitions, let's get to know digital divide. And what is this digital divide? We've been hearing about it. Actually, this is kind of a gap that we have with the generations that come before us, or generations that will come after us. So each generation has its own preferences in learning. So what does it mean for the teacher? When I say you profile your students, you try to identify what generation am I handling? Am I handling silent traditionalists? Am I handling boomers? Am I handling alpha, generation alpha? Because that will determine your approach to the subject. Take note, competencies will always be the same, but the manner of teaching that will always depend on how you strategize the whole thing. So let's start with silent traditionalists. So they are born between like 1925 to 1945. Social media applications that they are currently using is Gmail. If studies show that they are usually using Gmail for interaction. So they always try to be formal with letter sending. Others are, being acquainted to iMessages, to what else, to messenger chats, to WhatsApp, but most of them still prefer the Gmail because it's safe now. So that's always their claim, that it's safe. Next is we got the boomers. Boomers are sometimes using social media, but the main purpose is for telehealth, meaning sometimes they are too, sick to go to doctor's appointments, so they use social media only for health and whatsoever. They love watching TVs. So they get news from radios, TVs, that's their source of information. We have Generation X. So Generation X are more concerned with using social media. 74% of them are using social media, and sometimes these people, they like to make their profile picture or their profiles in private. So they don't like, reporting everyday scenarios in their life. But that varies, because this is just a general stereotype on different generations. Maybe because you'll say, I'm Generation X, but I'm not like that. So again, this is just a general stereotype of that specific generation. And from all generations, they consume much of TV, period. So they really like watching TV. And then we go to the millennials. So from 1980 to 1995, they are so into Wi-Fi. So millennials, they go to a certain place, they ask for, is there Wi-Fi? Can I connect to Wi-Fi? Mainly because they spend like 50 minutes longer in smartphones every day than other generations before them. So that's 50%, 50 minutes longer than previous generation. And they're also into keeping track with online transactions. And the use of social media is geared to probably learning things, learning skills for millennials. Let's go to Generation Z. That's 1995 to 2010. So this the generation, sometimes our students belong to this high school, college, and even sometimes us here belong in Generation Z. So we are considered to be digital natives, not digital immigrants anymore. So I think we started from millennials, from Generation Y, Generation Z, and Generation Alpha. We are considered to be digital natives, meaning we are born with the technology now. So it's not difficult for us to have this change of attitude, change of mindset, and change of interest when it comes to social media. But for digital immigrants, for silent traditionalists, baby boomers, and Generation X, they're slowly, they're getting used to the social media. Sometimes most of them have this bad perception in social media. Most common script will go, kapag nagso-social media ka or nagagamit ka ng gadget, hindi ka nag-aaral ng mabuti. That's usually the notion. Well, we cannot dismiss because maybe they don't have the access of those resources when they were young. But then we need to educate them that social media is not really perfect. It's not always advantageous. That is why our goal is to always put that into the proper use. And that's our role as educators, to facilitate that instruction. Generation Alphas, they are considered to be the most adaptable in terms of social media. Sometimes your kids know better with features, with privacy settings more than their parents, because they know that if they share something, that might be used against them. When they take pictures, that can be used against them. However, Generation Alpha is also considered to be the most vulnerable generation in terms of spreading fake news and unreliable information. So where saan na papasok si teacher dito? When we study literature and we tell them this is how you make criticisms, this is the format of saying your response. We don't give them a single unified perception about a thing. The problem kasi is when we let them try to interpret a literary work, we always dismiss other points. What does it say? If you really study literary criticism, this would tell us that there's no single unison view of how we interpret a literary material. It always depends on what lens you are using. So if I'm using the Marxist lens, of course, I will not be dealing with formalistic elements anymore. If I'm dealing with historical biographical lens, I will be on these margins. So you have to tell your kids that, and you also have to practice that in class. Now, you don't just to have like, example, how do you find the story? And he presented using the construction, like Miss Prison is not something that is Prison by Nila Aguilar is best interpreted using the deconstruction technique or just the construction approach, but we must not be limiting to that. Other teachers are still sticking to the formalistic view, like the number of lines, the number of stanzas, the rhythm. That's still essential, but then again, do not limit your students with that. So let's go to the media users. If you can check from 2020 with forecast until 2026, social media users are increasing. Generation Alpha, the one trivia about Generation Alpha, 44% of them consider gadget as their favorite toy. Let me ask you, when you were young, what's your favorite toy? Sometimes most of you will answer, Miss, the what the in Bisaya we call that the takyan, or the Beyblades, the paper dolls. Usually we have that. But right now, our kids, Generation Alpha, they have a different take of their, of their favorite toys. More than that, they also use language that we cannot understand anymore. Sometimes, when I have classes and they comment on the chat box and they say, um, IYYK, and then I would say, "What's IYYK?" If you know, if you know, something like that. So they use abbreviations, they use language. So language and literature, they always, interesting thing to study, cultural changes, because they're all intertextual, and they would clearly explain a thing or a certain phenomenon or a certain trend, perhaps. Then we have number of social media, leading mobile apps rather, used by internet users. So if you can see, 98.2% is social networking apps, followed by chat apps, entertainment or video apps, shopping apps like Shopee, Lazada, Zalora, or anything. We got game apps, music apps, and other dating and friendly apps. They're actually using that. So can we just say, do not use that, because we'll just use that, and because you're only focused on your books and on the readings and on the course factoring classes? No. Sometimes students can relate and can understand concepts based on what they have read in their social media sites. They are not familiar, one time, they are not familiar with Romeo and Juliet. They don't know what's Romeo and Juliet. They just know, I've asked them, why is this considered to be, someone mentioned that it's the most romantic romantic story ever written. And then I asked, what makes you say that? And then she said, actually, miss, I haven't read and I don't know Romeo and Juliet. It's just that I've heard that from Taylor Swift's song. And then from how I understand the song, it's like a love for someone so deep and so true and so genuine. So there's a conflict in there now with the new media and the old media, because again, it's open to interpretations. And sometimes if we base the new ones to justify the old ones, there are problems with interpretation, or there will be problems with how students would generalize the text na. So that is why don't forget your classics. And once you introduce your classics, you can use the new ones to scaffold learning. Do not also spoon feed the information, okay? Because we're training independent learners. When they go outside our walls and they become adults, no one's gonna spoon fed them with the information that you are doing while you are still their teacher. You let them be independent with the way they try to rationalize their thoughts. Next is we got here social media platforms in the Philippines. Number one is YouTube, followed by Facebook. We got Facebook Messenger, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, Pinterest, and so on. And this is from Statista. So you can imagine that YouTube, why do you think students right now have a sudden career shift? Before, maybe 10 years ago, when a grade 1 teacher will ask their student, what do you want to be in the future? Others will say, I want to be an engineer, I want to be a doctor, I want to be a teacher, I want to be a police. Those are the usual aspirations of our kids. But now you can hear students now who want to be artists, digital artists, vloggers. And there's, my niece used to tell me, Tita, I want to be a vlogger because I want to enjoy traveling. And I also know that they also pay well. And, I was shocked because that's still a kid and she knows, or he knows things like that. Diba? So that's something amusing. And what does it tell us as teachers now, knowing this data, knowing about digital divide? Sometimes even teachers will say, ayoko nang mag-teach, gusto ko na lang mag-YouTuber with how many million followers, and you can earn millions in months. My sudden career shift na rin si teacher. So what does it tell us going back? It tells us that this data could be helpful because this could, help us informing our pedagogies and how we teach. And you have to remember to adapt local practices or local context to coordinate with the information that they have. For example, Beowulf. How did you know Beowulf? What was your teacher's strategy of teaching you Beowulf? It's usually about like just telling what the story is. But if you say to your students, are you familiar with these Philippine epic stories? Are you familiar with the Agnilamang, or are you familiar with Darna? Are you familiar with Pedro Pinduco? They would, it would ring a bell. It would ring a bell. But if you say, what's Beowulf? All you'll have is like reactions like this. They don't know. They'll just wait for you to give out everything. So you can introduce that in class so that they'll have a connection of thoughts. So it will ring a bell. Once it rings a bell, they will get interested. But your next problem will be to sustain the interest. And that here comes some strategies that we can integrate. And I will, give tips later. Next is sometimes the use of social media is only limited to higher education context, mainly because we have our culture of education na meron siyang pagka-traditional. And sometimes we feel like when we use social media, we are going against the norms. So when we teach our kids how to speak in English or proper enunciation of terms, we still stick to the stick method. Do you remember the stick method when you learned reading? It's a big stick that the teacher is using to give you the vowel sounds, the consonant sounds, and if you cannot get it, the stick will also land to those hands of yours, diba? So, how can we try to modify that one? Have you observed the development of language with the modern, the kids that we have right now? Parents are not native English speakers, but kids are very good with their accent and their choice of words, and they know how to speak English well, mainly because they are exposed in media such as the videos that they find in YouTube. They're very good with mimicking information. So with child psychology, child development, and language development, that could justify that social media really has an impact to how students digest and learners or kids digest information. So again, we can capitalize on that. Next is we got here for a while. What's happening to my slide? When we integrate technologies in class, we are going alongside with technological landscapes. So as teachers, no matter you say, Miss, it's tiring. Sometimes I'm old now. I don't know that. Let it be. What happens, let it be. Sometimes it's not good to just say that, because take note, it's always our ethical, moral, and professional responsibility to always put the welfare of our students and the development of their competencies as our priority. And here are some whys and hows on how we can integrate literature, social media, the teaching of literature. So we use that to increase students' motivation and involvement. For example, before we are so used to letting our kids write longer words for essay, right? And what are the problems that you encountered? First, there's too much level of plagiarism, because I don't know, there are many apps right now that will let you rephrase, rewrite. So when you put that to plagiarism checker, you can find that it's like, that's not plagiarized, but it's a product of patchwork plagiarism, not the ghostwriter type of plagiarism. It could be patchwork plagiarism. 10 sources, you patch it into one, voila, you have your essay. So sometimes if you are checking like tons of essay, you might not be able to really check if it's really the student doing that, not unless you put them in a space and they're actually just doing it by themselves. So instead of just sticking to the actual words, you can let them respond to a literary material through photo essay, and that's one way to visualize storytelling. It could be thematic or narrative. And how can we use that, miss? Take take note. Instagram profiles of your students, they are telling stories with pictures. Sometimes they accompany that with little words, but then again, the picture speaks for itself. Just like art, that could be interpreted to how the reader or the viewer sees that one. Some examples of this are the following. So you give them a certain concept and they will be writing about it. If this is just posted without the photo, that might not get the interest of our students. But since the photo is catchy, we got the little kids showing off their works, being proud of what they've done. It will keep you hooked up to reading. Another one is we have here what we call thematic essay. So instead of like telling them that the world is not living similarly with the people in this world, they are not living similarly with other regions. Instead of just giving your proposition like that, you can show them this example, what the world eats, and then let them identify what does that mean, and then go to your literary text. For example, my context is I will be introducing what's that poem, The Farmer's Son. So for example, I would be teaching The Farmer's Son all together with Pork Empanada. That those are Philippine literary stories. I really advise you to put that in class because those are very beautiful works. So you can put that, and then with the response, they could have their what the world eats to highlight issues of poverty, illiteracy, and other critical concepts. So here it's just a series of families who are posting before the meals that they usually eat or the food supply that they have. So as you can see, it varies across cultures, right? And upon letting my students see this, instead of like reading the whole thing, they would understand, they would give out many perspectives of how they would try to make sense of this information. They would say something about culture, they would say something about preference, they would say something about capitalism and its effects, they would say something about preservation and modernization of something. So you see, you can elicit responses through this media that we see online. And what else? For example, this is a product of my student. I told them, you can tell me a story that through pictures. So there are 4 shots. So we got establishing shots, we got the profile, the portraits, then the conflict and the clincher, the last part. So this is very interesting. This is posted with permission, and the student asked permission as well to the subjects of this particular photo essay or photo narrative. So as you can see, this is how she tried to interpret the whole thing for us. The act of the woman giving out something to someone is an act of service. So it's an exchange probably, or it's a direct giving of something. So this talks about service. Then we go to establishing shots, and we got here the Ayamandawe tent, and that's in Cebu. And then you got their pedia, dental, medical, tuli. What else? The mata consultation, or for something for the eyes, and then what else? The reading of the results. So you can see that there's a medical mission that's going on in this story. But the focus of this are the following profiles. We got little boys, and you see different emotions in this picture. Some are confused, afraid, excited. So from the picture itself, we can be very descriptive and imaginative in giving responses. And our students could give out many adjectives. So when we teach photo essay, or when we teach through photos, we could inculcate types of adjectives, diba? Emotions, and other words in language. Then we gather them lining up. So if this is kids, they could be having many assumptions. It could be dental, it could be medical, but you see them, little boys lining up with their guardian. So suddenly you will have an idea that this is really something. And from there, the main focus is Tule. And then you got there all the tools for Tule, and then you got there the consent and whatsoever. So it gives us something that this cannot be done without, the parents' involvement. Here comes the actual part, and the last photo was this one, and that's how she ended the whole thing. And you know what, it was a holy hour. If you are in that time slot and you are teaching, like, narrative stories, so it's a challenge to also keep up with how our body responds to the time. But at this specific point, we are all energized because we are letting the kids or the boys in the class share their thoughts about it, and then we discuss about the cultural context of that term and how it's relevant to making the short story. And from the terms, we go into denotations and connotations. So you see, it continues the whole thing, and it makes the whole thing exciting as well. Next is we can also integrate short word stories, and usually we find that in Facebook, Instagram, Pinterest, and Twitter. You know what, our kids, parents, or I can relate to this one. Sometimes my mom will tell me, anak, gawan mo nga ito ng caption yung photo ko kasi I don't know what to place here. So sometimes we let the younger generation create captions for us, and when they create captions, matindi talaga yung tagos sa bones, yung it really meant something, like I saw and I stayed quiet. Oh, diba? It's powerful. It's just, telling emotions, expressing the intense emotions that you have right now in limited words. So what we do in class is sometimes when we give out responses and we check how students form figurative language or how to use figurative language or symbols, even symbols in class, we let them create like short narratives, short word stories. Typically, they just stand for 3 to 10 words. So again, 3 to 10 words. So this is very applicable if we want to elicit an immediate response. And sometimes we are amazed na we are just asking for, think total, we are just asking for 6-word short story, but they placed that in a very good layout. Probably they got it from Canva, or sometimes they draw, they doodle, or sometimes they take pictures, they post that, and they use the 6-word story they used in class and then share that to other people. So still, we are rolling the boulder. If you check on Facebook, your students might be subscribing to these pages, like 6-word story, because you can find there, many literary words, symbols, the play of words that they are inculcating here. Next is we got here Book Talk. TikTok is one of the promising, social media apps that even 5 years old kids were subscribing. There are risks. I always tell you, there are always risks in, introducing these apps to students. That is why we need to guide them on how to use it properly, or you model it yourself as a teacher, using that one in a very educational sense. Some of my kids, instead of just, asking them about summaries or recommendations, you can give them the option, not the option, you can give them the option to create book talks or video wherein they could also share that to others as to how they view the book. Or that's usually 15 to 60 seconds in length, but there's an update for TikTok. You could have videos recorded for 3 minutes. So take note, if you search hashtag book talk, that is with 25.1 billion views. And if you search hashtag book recommendations, that is of 1.7 billion views. So you actually see that there are many people who are also looking into, like me myself, when I buy a book, it could be under two grounds. It's either I love this author, so regardless of what the book is, I will try to read it, or it's based on a friend's recommendation, or I find the recommendation very interesting that makes me want to buy the book. So for students, maybe they don't have the luxury to actually buy the book, but then they could find resources. In fact, other kids were telling me, Miss, do you have this? Can I borrow? Diba? You can let them borrow books. After all, if you just take care of it, you are, doing service to the literary community. So this could be applicable in lieu of written assignments. So reading is a challenge, writing is a challenge. It doesn't mean that we forget about writing, okay? We're just giving them options. Multiple intelligences by Howard Gardner tells us that there are many ways that students express their interest and their skill on a specific subject. So might as well we always give them options. And this is like, these are samples of book talk and book talk recommendations. Okay. And another thing, we use social media in teaching because we want to fulfill ways of collaborative and participative learning. And one of that is through Twitter forums. And you know that there are so-called subgenre in fiction that's considered to be one of the 21st century literary genres. We call that Twitteriterature. How does literature work? So there is like one thread, and then the series of thread will actually narrate a story. So sometimes our kids are so into that. In fact, someone said, Miss, can I just share my Twitteriterature in class? Because I created a very short story and I think this could be interesting. So I let her, share that one. And it's exciting because aside from sharing that to her classmates and to me, she was also sharing that to a specific community. And others were like praising her or him. But then I always tell my class, you have to be very careful with sharing your content. Make sure that you're comfortable, and you have to be open that since it's out online, there will be many commentaries, and you have to be very ready for that. And teachers, this is also a notice. Do not rate your kids' work in terms of the number of likes. It's sad that other students are very confused about it because, Miss, do I have to be popular to get a good grade? Others really want a good grade. Who doesn't want a good grade, right? But then again, we don't just tell them you have to reach 100 likes or 100 reactions for you to get the perfect score. Check how you strategize. Again, do not use social media just for the sake of letting other students feel uncomfortable about it. Okay. Twitter forums, they can follow relevant hashtags. And for example, when I search how to kill a mockingbird, you can find there not just the How to Kill a Mockingbird series, novel rather, by Harper Lee, but related news in other countries that is closely related to the plot of How to Kill a Mockingbird, which talks about the injustice system, colors, stereotypes in society. Even the adventures of, if you're familiar with the adventure stories, Bildungsroman and Picaresque novels of Mark Twain, or also known as Samuel Clemens, you can check on that. We could also use comparison of the adventures of Pedro Pinduco and how individualism is so different in the American context and in the Philippine context. And you can check it on because students are reacting, students are commenting, and if they're not doing that, they are sharing those forums in Twitter. But then again, you have to be open that there are things that you might not feel appropriate when social media has its stakes. Okay, that's just the thing that I want to present. This is an example. So with the hashtag Black Lives Matter, you can open up the discussion on how to kill a mockingbird. And when you say, In fact, I have who's the author activity in my literary class just to let my students, be acquainted. You got 2 minutes to introduce an author, the famous works that he had, and why you chose that. You'll find that he played as Samuel Clemens, he played as Shakespeare, I played as Jose Rizal, he played as this and that, so that you can also get your kids be acquainted. And in fact, in a TikTok series, because I found students' outputs using TikTok, and there is a sample of the song Tayo'y Filipino, something like that, and they are, dressing up as Katipuneras, dressing up as national heroes in the Philippines. So it's actually a good initiative. You just have to teach them how to gather sources, how to verify if what they got from those sites are reliable. So we need to cultivate that idea. So, aside from, I agree that social media literacy is needed today more than ever, and critical thinking skill is very essential. So, it's not just enough to teach them that this is social media, but you have to tell them how to consume everything in social media, how to respond, how to react as rational individuals. And another one is, aside from book talk, we got booktube in YouTube, and this is the first, and this came first before TikTok, so you can find their book recommendations, why I like this novel, why I don't recommend this, things such as those. And our students right now, this is our advantage, because before we only learn sometimes the plot of this one or recommendations from others if we hear that direct orally from someone. But right now we can just search that in YouTube, and students could also be very practical with their choices, diba? Because there are also soft copies, Wattpad copies. You just have to let them know that they are not violating the rules of copyright. Okay, and then we got here samples of booktube, best reads, booktubers, and book hauls, diba? And it can inspire students to actually love reading. And it's also inspiring for us teachers, but that there are still students doing this. So it gives us hope that we can still do this, we could still be agents of change, and we could create society with critical learners. Then this one, I like this, the Spotify playlist. We have been talking about a novel, and then I always tell my kids, you can be innovative with your responses. I gave them specific rubrics for each. If they opt to do this Spotify playlist, it's with a different rubric. If they opt to have the traditional essay, it's with a different rubric. But you just have to really consider if they have the weight is still, nothing is so much easy. Hindi lahat sobrang difficult. It's still, eliciting a response according to their preference. Because after all, if we hit the competencies, regardless of how it's done, if it's the traditional or the modern way, that still sounds all right, diba? As long as we give our students the freedom or the option to choose from this and that. We're not just limiting them to, okay, you just have to draw. What if, miss, I don't know this, because I understand the story, but I don't know how to draw. Diba? That's a problem. If we always, stick to one activity only, but we want to, cater on the visual style of learning or the artistry of our students, it could be done millions of ways. When you talk about poetry, when you talk about tone, when you talk about setting the mood and the theme, you know what? You'll be amazed with how students explain it through pictures. Miss, this is my picture. I got this. In fact, I use this as my cover photo in Facebook. And I would like to give an explanation as to why it represents my identity. You see this cloud over here. So you see, but that they are integrating these concepts through various media. And you see that there's learning and the competencies are meant or are achieved. rather. So in Spotify playlist, so in teaching figures of speech, if you observe in our references, what's usually our take for figures of speech? We use text from old novels. We have classical novels. We got the words of Shakespeare still. We have Dickens, the words of Dickens and Browning. Those are usually the sample, or the Daffodils poem. They're always integrated to figurative languages discussion. However, maybe our kids don't really get acquainted with those. Again, you still use the classics, but then to get their interest and to continue the learning, you can integrate songs. Like for example, you let them listen to a song, but you have to filter. This is also our responsibility to filter songs because there might be inappropriate words, and we will be the makakasala pa tayo sa mindset ng ating student because we are introducing inappropriate song in class. So you have to really stratify, you have to strategize properly. So for example, when I teach figurative speech, I do that with songs. And if I do my assessment, like for example, Bruno Mars songs like that, and then if there is something like what else? I would catch a grenade for you. That's not actually telling you that I would really literally catch a grenade, but the hyperbolic statement tells us that this person would do anything for his loved one. There are also many songs like I love you like a love song, something like that. So why does this person tell that, or I feel like I'm a wrecking ball, something, the lyrics like those, they would tell their students that it's not actually the denotations. So you can use their interest to your advantage. So do not necessarily tell them, diba, na you cannot do this. You just have to model that properly in class. Okay, do not be afraid of, you know what, being comfortable in a certain setting is risky. When you are too comfortable with the system and you feel like that's okay to everyone, that there comes all the problem, diba? So if they're not, for example, Miss, what if these students are not musically intelligent? Then you can have the natural way of teaching them. If they like to read, you can go to poems. If they love watching films, you can use lines from the movies and what does it mean. So you can have many things, or if they like sports, you can use terms in news correspondence, sports correspondence that you can use in class. So you have to make sure you know as much as possible the interest of your students so that you can get to them, diba? You can join them. Or you can, I also agree, you can also find songs that are generally played that, or even national anthems, diba? At least you're hitting many points. So they actually know the song, they heard it because it's either they don't have a choice but to listen to it. So you use that, diba? Then yes, of course, memes, but then again, you have to be very careful about sensitivity because sometimes memes are funny, but they teach our kids that bullying is okay and we can just tolerate it. So again, we use words, but we do it with caution. Okay, we do it with caution. Do not use memes for the sake of this is funny and kids are find it funny. No, I don't not recommend that one. And we also use social media to capitalize on students' familiarity with these tools like Twitteritcher. In fact, there are many interesting stories that are or narratives done in Twitter. So poems and stories, they're also publishing there. Me as a person, I really love, Instagram. Why? Because maybe it's my personality to, because I think Facebook is too commercialized, it's too public, even though you set that with your friends. But then again, I had the period in my life when I just accept friends. So I'm at this period of unfriending strangers. So I'm at that period in my life. And um, if, for example, you cannot, sometimes our kids, they don't like publishing things in Facebook. This is one of the narratives I got in research. They don't like because their parents and their relatives are there. And sometimes they are bullied inside their household, and they don't like posting whatever they feel because they might get scolded. So they tried to provide anonymity, and sometimes you can do that in Instagram because you just have a name and you can just post your works, you can just post your photos in Instagram, and not everyone could identify that it's you. When we had our Instagram, using Instagram in teaching creative writing, we let our students, create their own. We just have a certain hashtag that we use. So when I search for this hashtag, the usernames following or posting photos of their output, those who consented to having Instagram as their um, product or output response, I can just see there, and then they just give me their name, and this is their account. So that, but there are also many verification. It's a long process when we had that research in terms of making sure that it's really them, it's really their account, things like that. But there must be consent. That's the thing that I would like to highlight. There must be consent. Do not tell them. Sometimes we bribe, diba? We bribe that, okay, if you be part of this study or this intervention, I'll give you 100 points. So students might not have, they have a chance, but not sticking to that chance to have their outputs posted would make them lose 100 points. So sometimes they're uncomfortable with posting their work, but then they got the point, it's fine. So please do not do that. I don't encourage you, everyone, to have that thing. Do not, you are not forcing them, but you are not giving them, actually, you're not giving them a chance because it's either they get points or they do not. Okay. So we also use social media to capitalize on students' familiarity with tools such as Twitter. Our students, even grade 8s and grade 7s, or even grade 6 students, they have Twitter accounts. Imagine that. And they say that having Twitter or Twitter forums or Twiterature and even tweeters, that's what we tell. If you are a teacher who is into like narrating or using Twitter as an instruction or as a strategy in teaching, you are a teacher. So this made us create a combination of classical and modern language because you got modern language, diba? And then students got to add their own personal knowledge of social media to the story. That's their own narrative, and that's straight from the flesh. Next is we got Insta poetry. So sometimes our students try to give out their feelings through stories, boomerangs, interactive stickers, photo collage, short videos. Sometimes when they just present a setting or they just present a mood, they just give their poem, and then they take a video of the sea and its calmness, and it supplements the way we try to make sense of the poem posted by the student. These are also samples of works that are posted in Instagram, and these posts were liked and followed by our students. So for example, when you teach them, this is a continuation of Romeo and Juliet. They are not familiar with it, but they have watched Romeo and Juliet. Are you familiar with that movie, Romeo and Juliet? I asked my grade 8s that one. Are you familiar with Romeo and Juliet? They said, yes, miss, we're very familiar. We watched that movie. But then when I said, are you familiar with Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet? They said, no, miss, we are not familiar with that. They're not aware that that's a pastiche of that specific work. I also tell them the difference of parody and a pastiche, diba? And then we also have here To improve the quality of teaching, we use social media because we want to have strategies that would be for the benefit of our students. So sometimes I had this simulation of a messenger call. So I have a very long poem about telephone conversation by Wolseyka. So what I did was I tried to ask my friend that, can you call me through messenger and we'll try to show that in class. And I told them, class, I have a quick call. Can I answer that this? And I'll just put this on speaker and then you have to listen, because I really knew who are those students who are not really reading, because I usually post all the selected um literary texts at the beginning of the class. So these are the things so that you can read ahead. But others, they're not really reading. So you'll be shocked when I had this fake, staged messenger call. So we are narrating the experience of this specific person in this poem, Telephone Conversation. And they were like, Miss, is that really your friend? The why did you decline the offer? Why did you not let him or her stay at your apartment? Is that because she's black? Is that because she doesn't speak your language? Why is it's there's injustice, miss? So you can see that from the messenger call that I staged, messenger is very familiar for them. They realize that I'm actually narrating na the whole poetry, and they get the theme. And then when they try to compare it, it's not actually the whole thing, because I revised a little of some things. They try to make sense. Yes, miss, I understand this now about what do I mean by light brown, brunette brown? Are you dark, like dark chocolate? Because those are some of the lines in the poem. So messenger calls could be an area for you to expand possibilities for e-literary creation and criticism. In fact, when they're having brainstorm activities, some of my students prefer to have it through messenger calls. And sometimes, diba, there are moments, if we go to traditional setting, sometimes there are moments that all the group members space out, like we really don't have the idea, and sometimes we just talk. So how do they do that in messenger calls? They try to put effects on their faces. And even teachers like us, in meetings, if there are break times, we also try to enjoy ourselves, just to really get back to working like 1 minute after. So you see, instead of telling them, do not do that, that's a distraction, um properly set regulations and protocols so that it will not also be difficult to you, and you're not also being unfair to the learner. What else? And then we have Gmail letters. So this is one thing. When I was assigned in a school, when I was still on a student teacher, I was handling grade 9 kids, and then grade 9 learners. But then there are two students whose age was like 29, 27, and I was 19 that time. So it's a challenge for me. And when I tried to get into letters, diba, epistolary novels that it's narrated through letters, they don't relate much on some kids, those that are younger than those two students. They relate much on Gmails, like, miss, when I write letters right now, I do it through Gmail, so we exchange this through this and that. But those kids, they prefer the handwritten one, written in a scented paper. So they have this culture still. Do not tell them that they cannot use it anymore. Instead, give them options. So you can do that. Others who would like to try, the other one would like to venture in Gmail, and then those younger ones would try also to write letters the traditional way. So you see, when there's when you are giving them possibilities, students feel like they're not restricted to a cage, and then they're just like programmed to do a thing. They feel like learning is upon SGDs. They say that they feel like They're learning at their own pace when they're given options. They're learning when they are not just told that this is the only way to do it, but they would like to have guidance on how to do it. They also don't like that we just tell them that, kayo nang bahala diyan. Whatever you want to interpret, that's fine. They also don't recommend that one. They want everything to be set out. So that is why we need to properly set proper guidelines for them to follow. And we also need to experiment with new tools such as, for example, Mentimeter. So eliciting responses before, like for example, when I say what words come into your mind when I speak of revenge, something like that. So students would submit a word, and then they find that once I get the result, because it's written in, it's written something like this, when I get a response, some texts are bigger, meaning many people are integrating revenge with that term. So you see that they feel like they're not alone, and since it's not presented that Erica said this term, they feel like whatever their response will be is kept confidential, and they will not be judged as to whatever their response will be. Okay, so you have to remember that our students, their confidence is very fragile. Not everyone is very comfortable in speaking in front. So sometimes, if they don't want to work, there are also kids, for example, in theater arts, when you teach drama, you don't assign the characters. You don't assign the characters. They like it better when they own it. Because once they own a certain task, they feel obligated and responsible to fulfill the necessary things that they need to do. But if you tell them, because you're pretty, you will be like this. Because you're this, you'll be like that. What if I'm not, I don't conform to the standards of beauty as set by society, but I want to be Juliet, but I want to be Cinderella, but I want to be this and that. Do I not deserve the right to do that? Will you be, as teacher, will you tolerate those stereotypes in class? Will you be the initiator of those stereotypes in class? So that's the question that you need to ponder. And what else? Aside from, eliciting responses, you can let them present codes, instructions, QR codes, quick forms, surveys, polls using Mentimeter. So you can have that in class. And Flipgrid. So when doing the video coverage, or when students would like to have a monologue, I told them that they could present in class live if they want, or if they want to be recorded, that's fine as well. So in Flipgrid, you can assist students to articulating what they have learned, and it's an opportunity for them to voice out on related topics to their personal experiences. So how Flipgrid works, you give out a certain theme, and they will be uploading whatever they want to say about, for example, describing your supervisor. So we are either profiling the supervisor that we want, the supervisor that we had, the supervisor that we imagined, or we could take a different approach, still related to the theme, justifying how we bridged that concept. And we also use social media in teaching literature to share content material with people easily. And that is why we have Wattpad. I heard, this is just what I heard, and this is very sad. You don't read Wattpad because that's not reviewed internationally. And you know what? That's frustrating. That's disappointing to hear, because we got brilliant authors here in the Philippines. And you know what? There are many writers, students of us, or were writers in there, that are earning money and that are pursuing their passion to write. So we must not be the people, my God, in the art industry. They're always judge that if you follow your dreams and your aspirations, it will not make you rich. So sometimes we're the ones turning off the dreams of our kids. While it's essential to teach them about practicality, we teach them also to be innovative and find ways to pursue their dreams while staying on the ground, while still surviving. And you know what? It's fulfilling to know na your kids before, this kid is so silent in class, but this kid is a writer now. This kid is so shy, but you can find this as a theater, but you can find her or him as a theater actor now. Others who are working, you know, in the behind the curtains, they don't really try to show their faces on stage, but they are great directors, composers, stage managers, singers, diba? So you see that through our constant planning, strategizing, we could produce stars in the future. But you know, there are many definitions of what a star is, and we must not restrict it to the idea that only those that appear in TV are called stars. Those that stay at the background, they're also shining in the best way they think is possible, in the ways that they know and they're capable of. And I think I'm done. I'm done. I think that's it so far with how we teach literature. But then let me reiterate that when you teach literature, when you teach social media, I would teach literature rather using social media. There are many things that you need to consider. It's not just something you find interesting, so you want to integrate in class. You have to consider again the consensus, the agreement, privacy matters, accessibility, and resources of the students, while making sure that your competencies were also not put aside. Okay, so I think that's just it. And if you have, you know, experiences or questions, I would love to entertain it. Or maybe you can share a little experience or strategies that you did in class that might be very beneficial to our audience today.
Thank you so much, Miss Erica. So I'm back, everyone. I'm actually listening well to Miss Erica's discussion today. And one thing that actually really struck me was one of the questions in the chat box, which looks into introverts. There are a lot of students who are actually introverts. But this is one thing I can say is that the reason why these students have to go through basic education, high school, and senior high school is for them to somehow experience uncomfortable situations. Because sometimes uncomfortable situations, when they were able to pass this uncomfortable situation, can actually give them more benefit. If they are uncomfortable speaking in the public, they can only do it once in a class, right, Miss Erica? And I have seen a lot of my students also who made use of social media because they are actually using it, but not necessarily expressing through it, was able to express because of a course or a subject. And they have the right to actually take down some of their works if they actually think it is needed. But that is only after they have been graded. Again, these students, including me, including I think Miss Erica, has been using a lot of information and social media in a sense to either communicate your feelings, our feelings, or to communicate with students directly. Again, this is part of the learning, being in an uncomfortable situation. Even I, Miss Erica, before when I was still a student, I really don't like public speaking. But here I am, as you can see. Okay, so it really creates some sort of change, and then these students would be able to adapt later on when real life asks them to do so. And this is one of the many things we can actually teach our students. Okay, let's try to see if there are more questions in the chat box. Okay. Oh, there is this one question. One of the struggles in teaching with my tutees is the comment of other parents who are questioning my use of laptop screen for presentation. I would like to hear some suggestions how to answer such concerns. I think this is coming from a teacher who is using presentations, if I'm not mistaken, Miss Erica.
Yes, Miss Jera, because sometimes when I present the digital divide, usually parents would feel like if a material is done by hand, or for example, it's through cartulinas, it's through chalks, and it's through paper cuts, they feel like there's an effort to actually do that. But I think what we need to do is to, give awareness to parents that maybe they're not aware that their child learns best using this technique. They have, maybe because when they were actually students, they are constricted to the idea that there's only one single strategy or method in learning. That's what was practiced before. So when we integrate new concepts right now, or when they say yung PPT presentation, pangtamad lang yan, yung hindi kailangan yung mag-cut ng materials, yung pag-print ng something and whatsoever, they don't even know the cost of why we're doing that. We're actually saving money, or we're saving resources, we're saving the earth, and we're getting their child's interest. So I think as much as possible, if you are a tutor, you come into agreement with the parent as to how you would like to strategize the intervention, so that they would understand where you are coming from. Because maybe they're just questioning it because they're not aware of its benefits. Yes.
Okay, I think that is also true. And I will just give you also an idea that making a PowerPoint is actually mind-boggling as well. Because especially for our generation, we wanted to have very good looking PowerPoint in which our students can actually relate to. And the better it looks, or the easier it looks, the better that we will get their attention. And sometimes being in a generation, or being born in a generation that is not of the same or relatedness with the new generation right now, we often feel that digital materials are effortless, but they are actually made with love and effort by most of the teachers. Okay, let's go to the next question. Okay. One of our participants here is teaching grade 10s, and they would love to use grade 10, and they would love to use social media as a tool in enhancing motivation and reading and literature. However, the quality outputs are a real challenge because their comprehension level has declined due to the pandemic. I had a number of learners who cannot read. Honestly, these innovations are promising, but sometimes we have to go back to the basics. She said that she will try to profile her learners first to tailor fit and would successfully use these tools in class. And she's asking if you can share with her a paper, I think, the written paper about this. I think you have one, Miss Erica, right? It's all
Yes.
about Instagram. I think she will
Yes.
get something out of it. Or maybe you can give us a little bit of backgrounder about the Instagram study.
Okay, so thank you, Miss Jera, and to Miss Erica as well, for we have the same name, just with different spelling for that question. For the Instagram teaching, we actually use that intervention with the students' consent. So meaning they all agreed to publishing their post in Instagram. Actually, it's a long discussion. When we tried to give out an intervention to use social media, it's not directly that we decided that it should be Instagram. It's a product of consultation. We gathered all the learners, we got their preferences, we asked if they have the access, if they have profiles, and of course, as teachers, you also have to know the basics of Instagram. Do you know how to use Instagram? Because what if you use that as an intervention, but you yourself don't have that specific account? So after such careful consultation, we tried to seek for consent, not just to the students, but also to their parents, especially for those who are below 18 years old. So we got the approval, and from there, we proposed how things would be done. So we got flash fictions. Our topic at that time in creative writing was flash fictions. And when you talk about flash fiction, there are many things. It could be short stories, rather. There could be flash fictions. There could be dribble, microfiction. So what we did was we asked students to publish their outputs in Instagram and ask them what's the difference of having it in Instagram or having it traditionally pass paper and pen to your teacher. And most of the responses gave us an idea that they feel more interested because they feel like it's not just the teacher only reading the work. They could share that to a certain community, especially when others are commenting. They don't know these people, but there are strangers commenting, this is a nice work. I can relate to the imagery of your short story. I could relate to the 6-word short story that you created because I'm feeling that at the moment. Others also presented that they could be more expressive because aside from the words, they are given the freedom to design it. Although we're not grading if what their designs are, if they had it layouted, but it's their option. So you see, you're not really giving them that job, but they feel interested and motivated to do more because that's something that they love. Downside was just like they have sometimes those who are not so confident feel like they need comments to validate their responses, and they would love to seek for feedback. So teachers' role in this part is very important, meaning they want to know first. They don't want teachers to check their work before it will be published, because by then they feel like their creativity is being limited and being questioned. So it's your job as a teacher that when they post that, you try to check on if it might be something off or okay, because sometimes our kids, they do things that they feel like correct but are not. So your job as a facilitator, as a supervisor, is really essential and important. Feedback, proper guidelines, protocols, those are important in the whole study. So meaning when you try to put an intervention to a specific problem, especially with the use of social media, it's not really an easy task, but it's fulfilling for us researchers. Especially when we talked about their outputs and others, we feel like we assume that after the whole intervention, they will be deleting it, but they did not. They retained all their works because they are so proud of it. And that's one thing that keeps us going as teachers as well, that we did something significant. There will always be rooms for improvement. But then again, we realize that that's the point of doing research, diba? We get what the recommendations and things to consider, and then we pilot it again. So I think that's just it, Miss Chera.
Thank you so much, Miss. We have a couple more questions. So I will just get some of the questions coming from the YouTube as well. And also maybe some of the questions that we can actually discuss about. But first, maybe you can answer this question. Assuming that we use social media in tackling polemical issues on literary text, how do we be able to incite our viewpoints on the matter, knowing that there are truths distorted by SOCMED or social media that are being interpreted by the students? So that's just one of the questions, Ms. Erica?
Okay, as I mentioned before, literary teachers are not just about teachers teaching you about what the story is and how could it what's the moral, what's the lesson, and how could you change the whole thing. As literature teachers, first of all, we need to model it to our students, but making sure that whatever we present in class, those are not just distorted truths. Those are not just um, there are many, especially when you talk about political agendas, it cannot be denied, especially when we tackle about um, works, especially with Harper Lee, or even in the context of Philippine literature. I always try to quote this Jose Rizal's novels. Those are part of grade 9 and grade 10 curriculum, right? And when you tackle those, it cannot be how do I call this? It cannot be avoided that we could be tackling that, or we could use societal issues to scaffold or to start a conversation, and students would like to present that this is how they they see things and this is how they believe on things. What should we do then? We cannot directly tell them that this is that your point is invalid, but we could teach them that there is a single thing, or there is a single protocol, there are protocols rather on how we could verify our sources, and not everything that we see in social media that's considered to be a factual account. There's always what we call subjective claims, meaning this could be my claim, but that's not solidified with facts. So I could not just claim it as if it's valid if it distorts something that is on records. So you have to tell them that sometimes that's part of stories. When you teach Philippine literature, they would present what truths are distorted and what is its effect, and do you like to be an enabler of that one? What happens if you're an enabler of fake news? What happens to a society or the community that tolerates that certain kind of machinery? And as teachers, take note, our students are watching us. They are watching us move. Even if we are not disclosing our real names in social media, they can find ways to search us. And if they saw that their teachers are also spreading distorted truths without, a proper validation, or even just listening to narratives that are not verified, they would somehow lose their trust on you. In fact, in a conversation in our humanities class, one student told me that, Miss, I feel like I haven't learned on this part because uh, when I was in grade 10, my teacher said everything that is published on books are just not true. They are not true. And he was teaching us that time. So what should I believe? Our kids are often confused with how adults react and manifest things in social media. So we must be very careful. And again, we teach them how to check on valid resources, and we ourselves must model it as well.
Okay, thank you so much, Miss Erica. We have our next question. I think we can discuss on this. Is there any particular social media platform that would bring out the best in an introvert students? As with my experience with students, there are times that you would really have to give them uncomfortable situations to at least express themselves orally, or express themselves as they are. If we always teach our students to be anonymous because they are introvert, we are not teaching them new experiences. However, if this is your concern, the best way to go is to find applications that can let students to create and to do things anonymously. Another thing is by doing a group mechanism in which the group will have their own group work and group outputs, in which the students, both extrovert and introverts, will have their own piece in the result, which means that, say for example, if you're doing a film, the introverts can express themselves by doing the layouting, by doing, there are things that they can actually do good and they can perform well as they can be a star of, even if they are not directly on the limelight. So it's not just about presenting themselves, it's more about where can we actually create an avenue that these students will shine. And in my case, when I was still in high school, I was very much of an introvert, unlike now. Actually, I'm still an introvert, but I have to be like this because this is part of my job and I enjoy learning with everyone. So what they did to me is this, because I'm very good at drawing, I'm very good at making materials. So whenever we have a theater play, they would ask me to do all of these set designs and paintings and drawings. And I would really have fun seeing my name being tagged there in the playbills as the main creator of these designs. So these are just some of the things, some of the avenues which you can use for the students. Another thing is some of these introverts actually really do good in group works because they know they can hide themselves within the results of the group. And another thing is by using anonymous social media, but known to the class. So yeah, so they might have a different name. Maybe some of these students do not want their parents to see their work, so that using their real name would be a problem. So maybe you can use like that. Also, the Mentimeter and the other types of like polling mechanism in social media can also be used, and they can send in their materials directly to you. Okay, and last question, Miss. This is coming from the YouTube. So hi there, coming from our YouTube participants. Thank you for always staying with us, even if sometimes our there's a limit, no, in the number of participants that we have here at Zoom. Okay, so those are just few of the tactics. Okay, let's look at things. Let's look at questions coming from YouTube. By the way, Miss Erica, we have viewers from YouTube, a couple of viewers from YouTube as well. Okay. I sometimes use online discourse, comments, threads as authentic materials in my writing class. I compare these to model text to improve writing. Is this strategy okay, or do I have to modify? I repeat, I sometimes use online discourse, comments, threads, etc. as authentic materials in my writing classes. I compare these to model texts to improve writing. Is this strategy okay, or do I have to modify? That's our
Thank
last
you.
question.
Yeah, I think that's a very interesting and that's very good for discussion. But the first question that we should consider is what's the for that's for what? What competencies are we hitting? Because if we're just taking a look at formation of arguments, for example, then we could use those commentaries, comments by others, and online discourses so that our students could compare and contrast how arguments are made and what's their stance, what is their point of view. But then if our competencies or our target skills are not geared to the actual authentic materials that were mentioned, we might be giving our students an avenue to be confused about what's really the thing, because it could either be if the instruction or the delivery of the content is not clear, they might be having an assumption that you are presenting it because you believe in that, and they are also ought to believe in whatever commentaries from different points of life that were presented during the class. So first is, I think I would advise that you must be clear with your intentions of using those authentic materials, and as a teacher, our job first is to might as well filter and be ready with the possible reactions of our students, so that if they will have confusions or questions, we could not just leave them hanging, and we could explain concepts for them. So the disadvantage, I think the disadvantage that I get from that is if instruction is not clear and the purpose of presenting is not clear, it might be confusing. But if everything is organized and systematically made to our students for this particular purpose, I think that's just okay. Because in the real sense, people will really have different views. They will be reacting to different things, and knowing that, for example, I will be making a position paper and you get to know this is how people see this particular debatable issue. And when you present these comments to class, first you have to make sure that when you present this online comments, you might be violating especially if it bears the name of that commenter and it's not in public, meaning that's just your friend in Facebook, and then you presented it publicly, you might also having privacy issues. So as a teacher, you also have to consider that one. So moving forward, there's in the selection of the materials presented in class, there are many things that you need to consider, and you have to lay it out properly with the competencies, with the purpose, and position papers man is one of the crucial samples that I got in mind, that wherein you have to present how people see this point, because that will also help our students weigh on what they need to stand for and where they can place their position as well. But again, you just have to be very careful in choosing those materials.
Okay, thank you so much for that. Okay. Miss Erica, is it good for you to like get a pass through for this particular question? I think this is quite important also. Given that in social media right now, like skimming information or skim reading, if that was the term, has becoming a new normal. What can we do to address the concern, especially when you need your students to really read closely some literature texts, and some of the students do not have that kind of reading level because of this skim reading becoming a new normal? What can we do as teachers?
Okay, when you talk about reading, skimming is not a bad thing. Actually, that's one of the reading skills that we teachers are developing and are teaching our kids, because there are some things that are not merely necessary but are just stated because for example, when you do news, busy people, they just skim material just to get to the point. When we read and grade work, sometimes we are guilty of skimming as well, because we know that this is their point and that is this and this is that. When I teach skills in reading and writing classes, I always tell my students the appropriateness of each skill. For example, when I skim material, when should I be skimming? When I scan, when should I be scanning? What particular materials are good for close reading, for critical reading, for reading beyond the lines, reading between the lines, or reading by the lines? So you have to identify that one. Sometimes it's already implicit as well, because our students in every level, but we try to put on skills onto how they try to make sense of a certain material, right? So I think that literature teachers, it's not entirely bad to let our students skim, especially you are just giving them a week to read a novel. That is impossible to, especially you are not the only subject that they have. I'll be very real. You're not the only subject that they have, and you ask them to read a novel for a week, and it's a very thick novel. And these are, for example, grade 7 students. So practically all they will be doing is to skim the material. What if you are letting them read a novel just to let them identify its theme? Do you think that's justifiable? So those are the things that you also need to consider. So reading skills, there are of many aspects, diba? Especially in digital reading, skimming is very important. But there are also articles that we need to read closely. So I think the job of the reading teacher is to provide proper classification as to how we read stuffs. And this is also my position. Not everything in literature is also closely read. There are new genres, especially in poetry, wherein poems are denotatively understood. So it depends actually on the material. But then again, skimming is not actually a bad skill. It just needs the right material.
Okay, so thank you so much for that, Miss Erica. I also agree with you. Thank you so much. Now let's have the certificate of Miss Erica. Michael, do we have the certificate?
Yes, Miss, but before that, can we just have the oath of for everyone?
Yes, definitely. Can we have the photo opportunity for everyone? Kindly open your if you'd allow us, kindly open your camera for the photo op. Sorry, Michael, I wasn't able to open my camera. I did not actually thought about it a bit because I think because of the technicalities a while ago. Okay, I'll be opening my camera as well.
Yes. Okay, I'm giving summertime now about 10 seconds for everyone. For those who have cameras, please open them up for photo opportunities for that.
So we got very beautiful and handsome teachers over here and even students. So I'm very happy to see all of you. Thank you so much for coming.
Yes, so we have 6 slides po. Marami-rami po tayo. And then, so keep smiling so we don't know which slides we belong, okay? So first slide. 1, 2.
I always believe that the TLRC public webinar participants are beautiful, young, and always pretty and handsome. They are actually the best participants for me. Being the host for these webinars every time, I always knew they are the best participants, always.
Yes, I also agree, Miss Jera. You know, even reading their questions makes you identify that they are really eager to strategize things for their students. So it's actually a noble vocation. So I admire you guys for that.
Yes. Most of them are actually teachers, but you know what? Large population of them are also students. So it's really good knowing that there's a lot of students very much interested with the public webinars that we have. Okay. So Michael is almost done. Kindly make sure that you have your smiles on.
Yes, so last slide.
Sir Kenneth is asking, okay na ba, Mike? Okay.
Thank you so much for turning on your cameras.
Thank you so much, everyone. Okay, now let's read the certificate for Miss Erica.
Okay.
Aba, Miss Portia, blooming po talaga ako. Everyday yan. Okay, let's read the certificate. Okay. Okay. So this certificate of recognition is proudly given to Professor Erica May Cabo for sharing her invaluable time and expertise being the resource speaker for the webinar Integration of Social Media in the Teaching of Literature, today via Zoom. This is signed by the TLRC coordinator, Dr. Natividad Virginia D. Estelio. Congratulations, Miss Erica.
Thank you so much, TLRC team. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much as well. Here are some of our evaluation reminders. Our evaluation and processing of e-certificates are automated, so please do make sure to type in the correct spelling of your name since this will reflect on your e-certificates also. Please be mindful in typing your email address because it is where you will receive your certificates. We suggest that you keep a copy of your response in the evaluation for you to verify if you have made mistakes. Normally, it takes less than 3 minutes after submitting to receive your certificate. Should you not be able to receive it by 5 p.m. today, just send a reply message with your concern to the confirmation email that we sent at msgalorio@up.edu.ph. We will manually send the certificates on the next working day. And thank you very much again. Kindly make sure that you submit the correct information. The evaluation link is open for only 10 minutes. Michael and Noel is already giving out the link to the certificate. Kindly check the chat box now. Miss Erica, how's your experience?
As always, Ms. Jara, it's always fulfilling to share. And I'm always moved with the comments of our participants. Sometimes it validated that I'm doing good. And I always appreciate the invitation of TLRC. I'm also not a social person like you, Miss Jera, but sometimes our job requires us to have this. But then it's something that was done. Like I feel like I don't have a choice. It's something I enjoy. But thank you so much for this opportunity.
Thank you as well. Thank you for giving your time and also your beauty to us. Okay. So Michael, shall we turn on the UP Naming Mahal for our ending session?
magpakailanman ating pagdiwang bulwagan ng kahangal humayo di tanghal giting at tapang mabuhay ang pag-asa ng bayan mabuhay ang pag-asa ng bayan
Thank you so much, all. If you wanted to follow us, here's our socials at the Facebook Teaching and Learning Resource Center, University of the Philippines, Cebu. Our YouTube channel at TLRC UP Cebu, our website at tlrc.upcebu.edu.ph. And if you wanted to connect with us directly, connect through our email lrc.upcebu@up.edu.ph. Have a great day, everyone. Stay safe. God bless, and see you in our next webinar. Goodbye, all.